Yeah. Do you think that's Joseph? Do you think that's do you think that has do you think that's been a positive change in baseball? This whole thing about like bringing in different pitchers, so guys aren't facing the same guy multiple times, or do you think it's not necessarily helping?
Uh, I think it. I don't know. If you don't have like a dominant starter out there like Scherzer or like a top line starter, I think it probably is good to get a fresh arm in there and like if you get some matchup like lefty and lefty and stuff like that, it's probably beneficial to you. And I'm sure the little analytics tell you that it is. But also, I just think that if pitcher's throwing well that night or he's on, you should just leave him in there. Like I think
Right.
it's case by case basis. Like if your starters, if it's the fifth inning and he's giving up 3 runs and it's kind of just average, okay, put somebody else in. But just throwing well, there's no reason to take him out just because you're supposed to. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and don't you think too that I think the current philosophy in Major League Baseball has lent itself to all these pitcher injuries, arm injuries, because maybe this isn't spoken outright, but I think it's subliminally spoken is that, hey, just go out there and throw as hard as you can for 6 innings, and then we'll bring in another guy. Okay. Well, that doesn't force the pitcher to use strategy, right? In other words, to say, okay, I'm going to throw this set of pitches to these guys the first time. The next time I'm going to have to change it up a little bit. I'm going to have to change speeds, change location. And now they're just going to go out there and throw as hard as you can for 6 innings, and we'll put somebody else in there. And I think they're overthrowing a lot of times. And I mean, I think that lends itself to the problem we've got today.
yeah, could be. I don't know. I don't know exactly what their thought process is. I do think they still use strategy, but yeah, I don't know.
That is interesting because I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
Because they maybe if they know they're only going to face a guy once or a handful of times, they feel like they don't have to. But Joseph said they still use strategy, right? They don't just throw. Joseph, you think they still prepare like, okay, I'm going to see these hitters multiple times. You're going to have to approach them different ways each time. They still think of it that way.
Well, I guess so. But I think about, we've all watched the movie For Love of the Game, a great movie, right? And Billy Chapel's throwing a perfect game. So obviously they're not taking him out. But late in the game, his arm was hurting. But he said, hey, think, Billy, don't just throw. And I think that's what pitching is all about, isn't it? I mean, when you start facing these guys the second time through or even the third time through, you can't just throw. You got to think, okay? In other words, how did I get him out last time? What is he looking for? Now I know to Joseph's point, is a very good point. Strategy says, hey, if I can bring a fresh arm in there, but I think these pitchers don't develop enough because you want a guy out there like Greg Maddux. I mean, the guy pitched a lot of complete games. I mean, because he was a master at what he did, and he never threw really that hard. It was all location, location, location. So, I don't know. I just think.
Who's to say they aren't thinking like that? I mean, just because they're not throwing as many pitches doesn't exactly have to correlate to the fact that, they're not really thinking and they're just throwing.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe they have the exact same approach and they're still thinking the same way. It's just that they're taking out quicker.
It could be. Yeah.
And Josh, to your point, do you? I know you said you think it should be more of a case by case type of basis, right? Like if your guy's on one night, you leave him in or whatever, not just strictly by the number of analytics. Do you think that? I assume that's kind of how teams did it. Like if the guy was on, they're not going to put in a left-hander just because the left-hander guy's at the plate. Or do you think teams do a lot of times go strictly by the analytics, not so much of what they're seeing?
I think a lot of teams go by the analytics.
Really?
Yeah, like they're not going to bring in a left-hander to like in the second inning or something. But when it's time to close to take the starter out or he's throwing 7 or so, then they're more likely to do that. Yeah,
even if he's hot, if he's on.
Yeah, depending on who it is. I mean, they may not do, it's Garrett Cole, but your average starter.
Well, you could argue that going by the analytics might have cost the Tampa Bay Rays a World Series last year. I mean, in game 6, I think was it game 6 or game 7? I don't remember exactly. 6, yeah. Blake Snell was pitching. He was pitching great. All right. Yeah. They pulled him out because he had reached such and such pitches, and they ended up losing the game, and the Dodgers won the World Series. I mean, even he was flabbergasted by it. So I think sometimes you get paralyzed by those analytics. They should have left him in there.
Well, take somebody out for pitch count in the World Series is the most ridiculous thing ever because he's about to have a whole offseason.
Right.
I can see if it's the first game of the year or something, maybe.
But my point is that's where the analytics become suffocating. Is if you keep going by them and going by them, you tend to not step back and say, okay, let me think this thing through based on the situation.
And have analytics have going strictly by the numbers or the introduction of analytics in any sport, has it ever proved to be better than the old way? I don't think it has. I mean, I can't think of an example of when. I mean, it seems like even in football, when coaches go more, when they take chances on going for fourth downs or they go more with their gut on situations, it seems to work out more often than not, than opposed to what the analytics do. This situation, it seems like the analytics maybe work from time to time, but on the whole, it seems like teams are winning and winning World Series, not on the analytics, but on something else.
Yeah.
And I know the A's had that whole analytics Moneyball thing, right?
Right.
But that was more about how you're going to build your team, not how you're going to manage in the game, right? That was more about how they're building their team. Right?
Probably. Yeah.
But my point is, has it ever proven that the analytics is the way to go in any sport? I don't think so.
No.